you know, on Brooke's earlier point is your team isn't just order takers. You know, they ask the questions back, they try to get to what the root of the problem is, because just because we think that we have a solution, there's many times I've come to your team and they're like, we get where you're trying to go, but there's a much better solution to get you there. And I appreciate that so much with your team.
All right, so today we're joined by our elite private client, OPTX.
Hi, I'm Brooke Fiumara, COO at OPTX.
And I'm Morgan Gaspard. I'm the Director of Brand Marketing at OPTX.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for making time. I know there's very interesting times going on right now, but you know, it's really interesting to always kind of come back to our clients and just kind of help explain for other people what the process was like for them. So for some businesses, they come to me when they already have a business or a brand. So I'll ask the same question that I ask everyone, which is, what was the problem that you had prior to coming to Branding for the People?
Yeah, so we came to Branding for the People with really just an idea for the name. We didn't have any type of identity. We didn't know if the name was even the right fit for us. We just had a name and really needed to pull all the components together that create a brand. A name really means nothing without a true brand behind it. So for us, we sought a firm that was going to walk us through that process and essentially hold our hand to get us to the right spot.
All right, so Brooke and Morgan, can you please explain what is OPTX and what does OPTX do?
So OPTX is an enterprise software solution that sits on top of multiple systems. We collect a bunch of data and then display it back in a useful way, focused on player insights, analytics, all in gaming and hospitality.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So you came to us looking for a new name, and you knew that building a brand behind that name was going to be paramount in order for it to be successful. Now, truth be told, you actually sent out an RFP and you interviewed several candidates. What was ultimately the reason why you chose my agency?
We did an extensive RFP. You know, we looked at boutique firms. We looked at some of the largest branding agencies in tech specifically. We looked at hospitality niche agencies. And what really stood out for you with Branding for the People is you guys weren't just going to, you know, take our idea or take our name and then just come back with a bunch of logos. You guys really focused on, you know, diving 10 layers deep and really forced us. It was clear that you were going to force us to put the heavy lifting and the work into actually creating a meaningful brand behind the name. And that was really important to me. That stood out as different than maybe some of the other proposals that we saw. And I liked that you were a small firm. I liked that you were able to move quickly. And I liked you, Ree.
Oh, cool. Well, there you have it. Thank God you did. Actually, I did say this at the beginning, but it's been super enjoyable to work with you and your team as well, because I think some of the best work comes out when it's a very collaborative relationship where you just gotta like each other working with. Like, there's doing the work, and then there's really being passionate about the people you're doing it with. So kudos right back to you. All right, so another question I don't ask everyone, but like in your case, you were a startup, you were a funded startup. Some people have the mindset of like, oh, well, let's just get the business going first and then work on the branding a year, 2 years, whatever later. But you made a very conscious decision to work on the brand now. I mean, for the reasons you just mentioned, right? Like to have a brand behind the name. But even if you can just explain a little bit or expand on that a little bit more, why did you know that it was important to actually do branding from the very beginning as opposed to waiting?
It's actually a really interesting question because we started working on the brand before we started working on software development. So as a software company, it's really interesting that we did put the brand before the product. And that's because, you know, we took all of our engineers through our brand story, who we are, why we started this company, what's important to us from our target audience perspective, what we want our customers to feel like when they engage with our product. And all of those, emotional branding components are embedded into our product from day one. And I'm really excited about that because I think our end users, it's going to feel really consistent. It's going to feel like part of a bigger story and not just a siloed product that all of a sudden we attached a brand to. And coming from a marketing background, that's always important to me, and marketing has always resonated with me, and I understand the power of a great brand. And it was a priority for us, and I encourage others to do the same.
Yeah, so you were already a convert of branding.
Fair
Now,
enough.
we're going to get more into you because you came a little bit later, but if I may just ask, what was that like for you to come into the organization with the brand strategy and the story already defined? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, it's such, a positive and something that was unexpected to be able to kind of walk into a startup with already having, a toolbox ready for you. So that was an amazing, surprise coming in as a team member, but also just, it lets the marketing department, as we're starting to get, that up to full speed, be able to hit the ground running. And one thing that I really appreciate about your team, and I came in a little bit after the strategy was done on more of kind of the marketing materials and the website launch, is, on Brooke's earlier point, is your team isn't just order takers. They ask the questions back, they try to get to what the root of the problem is, because just because we think that we have a solution, there's many times I've come to your team and they're like, we get where you're trying to go, but there's a much better solution to get you there. And I appreciate that so much with your team.
Awesome. And I love that you said that because you're also a solutions provider as well. And so,
Solutions everywhere.
appreciate that, like for your clients, and that you're providing the solution, not just kind of putting them in a sort of cookie cutter approach. Okay, so Morgan, you came in, we had all the assets, we had the visual identity, you had this whole toolkit. How has that been effective in your marketing initiatives and the things that you're working on to sort of generate more leads and get demos and all that sort of work?
Yeah, I mean, you guys obviously provided us a great visual and verbal identity for us to work with, which has been, like we previously said, just such a great thing to have in the toolbox when you walk into something. And we've been able to kind of continue to expand on that, both within, our software platform, the branding colors and everything that was provided to us, through marketing materials that we've created in conjunction with you, some of our brochures. We've continued to upgrade and update our website with solutions that we have worked on with you guys with, and you guys helped us get to some great solutions to help us drive demos and drive the sale portion of our business, which has been just fantastic to have you guys to lean on for, experience in that market and experience in that way of doing business that we were coming into a little bit green in business to business sales. So It's been fantastic that you've been able to kind of pivot with us as we've needed to shift here and there, and then get us to the solution that we needed to get to.
Cool, I appreciate that. I love that. All right, so the question I always like to ask people is like, what are some of the results? And particularly in a startup business or even in market changing conditions, there are always going to be some sort of near term and then ongoing results. But what are some of the results that you've been able, or outcomes that you've been able to achieve as a result of going that 10 layers deep, taking the time to build a brand, building a story around the OPTX name?
Yeah, so for us, we've spent the last year building the product, and at this phase of our startup, we were really interested in just building awareness. And so things like, our branding collateral and creative that we've developed, we see measurable increases in website traffic. We see measurable increases in click-throughs on our blog posts. We see measurable increases in open rates on our email blasts. And those are all things that you've helped us, not only from a design and copy perspective, but also from a strategy perspective. Like Morgan said, from a B2B perspective, we are new. And so we're learning, and we really lean on you guys to help us drive to help us achieve those goals. Increased awareness from a brand perspective has always been our number one goal for this first year. And I feel like we've come a long way.
All right, so now, Brooke, I want to talk a little bit about the creative process. You worked with our creative director, Cindy. Every branding agency ostensibly should, take you through the logo and the colors, but what was that process like for you going through our creative process?
It was really in-depth and pretty seamless. So, Cindy was able to take kind of, after we did the strategy and really talked about who we want to be and how we want to differentiate ourselves, Cindy kind of took all that and came back with 3 kind of directions. And they were all wildly different, but somehow all connected back to the original strategy. So there was a story behind each direction that she presented.
Yeah.
And, truth be told, there were things that we liked about every single one of them. And so we were able to give that feedback and talk through, we really love this component from this idea and this component from this idea. And from there, she went back to the drawing board and came back with another set of options around those different ideas. And then from there, we just continued to tweak and refine until we got to a logo and a color palette that we loved. And from there, we just continued to develop branding materials and assets around that.
Awesome. And thankfully, we were able to get all that feedback from you without creating a design Frankenstein. So kudos to you guys for being collaborative in that process.
That is, but that sounds really interesting.
It's like a mixed match of all different designs and it looks like a Frankenstein. What advice would you give, whether they're a funded startup or a startup in general or other businesses who might be on the fence going through a branding process? And actually, let's start with you, Morgan, and then we'll go to Brooke.
The advice that I would give really to anyone is you're gonna have to do it eventually. It is something that is a must as your brand is gonna continue down its growth path. But how great would it be to be able to have that at the beginning, so that path for you, at least in the marketing and sales, area, is well defined for you from the get-go. So you're not having to pivot 6 months out or a year out. I'm always a big fan of, no matter where you are in your brand journey, to go ahead and get, a branding guidelines, get branding strategy, and it's never too late. But if you are in a position where you can start out with it or put it at the very beginning of your journey, it will only help you and pay in dividends as you move forward, that you get to start with that in your toolbox.
Awesome. What about you, Brooke?
For me, a brand is just so much more than a logo. And I think that is something that, throughout my career, I've heard, people just talk about a brand and a logo. But for me, and the advice that I would give is that you really should think about your brand as a part of your culture, as a part of your product, and as really a foundation for everything that your company is going to do, not just a visual identity. And so if you start with that perspective, I think it becomes very clear that building a great brand from day one should be paramount, because ultimately, I truly believe that a great brand carries itself throughout your entire organization.
I love that. I think that's exactly why we get along, because for me, it's so much more than branding is just a logo and colors, and it really is about impacting culture, and it's the foundation for your entire organization. So there you have it. So Brooke and Morgan, thank you so much for your time, sharing your experience, and I look forward to seeing more of your successes as you sort of get to that next phase, having a solid foundation of your brand awareness, and I'm sure we'll be checking in with you in a year or two in terms of where are they now, sort of thing. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
You too.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.